Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Quantum Marketing Radio. Today we're actually here with our guest host, Joe Spillman, who's the president of ECA Marketing, and our very special guest, Don Quante. He is the best-selling author of Don't Go Broke in a Nursing Home, and actually a longtime partner with ECA Marketing. And I would just want to say welcome, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
So in the spirit of our podcast, it's generally about sales and marketing. Don has a kind of an interesting background, but before we get into that, I thought Joe maybe might add a little bit on why we ended up working with Don and what's new.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. And a lot of you guys have heard me with this presentation before, at least this piece of it. I actually believe wholeheartedly that as financial advisors that deal with consumers on a daily basis, we have a couple obligations. One, obviously, is help take care of their money and put their best interests before ours. But I really, truly believe in my heart that we owe two things to every one of our clients that we see. One is that we owe them the knowledge that they should be able to know how much guaranteed lifetime income that their asset can give them. We don't have pensions anymore. We have 401ks, which are hopefully big piles of money in retirement, but a lot of people don't know what that can translate into income. Jeff, you and I have talked a bunch about this in the past. I think that we owe it to our consumer. It doesn't mean I think every consumer should convert their asset into guaranteed lifetime income, but I think they should know what their number is. Second one is I think every consumer out there that you talk to or we talk to, or even in our personal situations, we've all gone through situations with loved ones that have gone through long-term care and the catastrophic effect that can create on a pile of money, right? You have to spend all that money for long-term care. A lot of people don't know what options are out there to help them protect their nest egg from that spend down process. So I believe the two things are show them what their number is and show them a way that they could potentially protect their assets against the long-term care spend down. When I was introduced to Don 3 years ago, this is his passion. He believes in this, not just as a way to make money in the business and sell to consumers. He believes in this inside and out. He had told me a personal story that he had gone through that got him into this. I had shared with him a story about my grandmother and my grandfather as they spent down everything they had, including everything they were planning on leaving to their kids and grandkids, which was me. They spent it all long-term care. There was nothing left at the end. And frankly, the experience of having to go through that was terrible for them. I had wished I had been in the business much earlier than I had, because then I could have shared a lot of this stuff with them. And frankly, because of meeting with Don, I have shared long-term care opportunities with consumers, specifically my aunts and uncles, because they're getting up there in age now, and I don't want them to have to go through this kind of experience that they saw their mom go through. So with that being said, that's the reason that we're so excited about this program. Don's got some just awesome stuff that help producers educate consumers on this program. A little bit we'll go into a little bit more in depth, as well as some marketing that helps show advisors how to get in front of more clients. And that's something I'm very excited about. So thank you, Don, for the partnership, and thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and by the way, just for you guys just tuning in or watching the replay of this, if you stick around to the end, we're going to have a little offer for you. So just a little teaser. You want to stick around for the whole podcast here today. So Don, I know you've been in the business for what? How many years now?
This is 36 years.
36 years. So that longevity in the business is tough. A lot of people come and go. How did you make it 36 years and go from, newbie to top of the table?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I started in 1983, and one of the old guys pulled me off to the side and said, youngster, all you have to do in this business is last. So like a lot of people, I was broke in this industry early on, seeing people at 6 o'clock, 8 o'clock at night, that kind of thing.
Sure.
And in 2001, I decided that I was going to stop that madness and convert my practice from being all things to all people, which is what most advisors in St. Louis were attempting to be, and become a specialist and have expertise in just one niche area. And I selected the area of long-term care because, as Joe mentioned earlier, I shared with him a couple years back, my grandmother was diagnosed with early stage Alzheimer's. We went through 100% of her money. 7 years, 7 months later, she dies broke in a Medicaid bed. And I could have fixed that had I known then what I know today.
Right.
So, so it's sort of like from July of 01 to where we're at now, by just making that focus. I know we were talking before we got on air about top of the table, and I'd never made more than 200,000 up until 2001. Since then, I've qualified for the top of the table every single year. That's 18 in a row now, or 17 in a row, excuse me. Had a chance to speak to the top of the table. And also earlier this year was one of the presenters at Forum 400. So it's amazing how one change in how you market could literally change your financial well-being.
You know, it's interesting. I mean, to step in there, it's interesting that he focused in the long-term care market for so many years when you and I both know hundreds of, if not thousands of producers that were in that long-term care market selling traditional long-term care,
yeah.
And they really have struggled or currently are struggling, or they're not doing it all anymore. They jumped into a different insurance field or a different financial services field entirely. And yet you're thriving and have been very successful in that field today because you adapted and changed the products that you're offering to consumers because it got very, very difficult, obviously, for traditional carriers to offer traditional long-term care products.
Yeah, and fewer and fewer of them that even offer it.
So, yeah. Well, it's kind of funny because I was telling one of your guys earlier over lunch that for every $1 of asset-based long-term care that we put on the books, there's $3 of assets under management that follow. So why that's important is I figured, wait a second, if I want to build my assets under management, I need to have a message that resonates with people who have money. Well, people who have money, believe it or not, will come to a workshop where the only thing they're going to get is this darn book.
Right.
We're not giving free lunches away. Not a steak dinner, not a piece of rubber chicken, a book with information. So it's not poor people that show up, people that have a lot of money.
It's people with the problem.
Yeah, and Joe's right, Jeff, the type of product this is we're offering is asset-based long-term care. So that's the key to it.
So obviously you learned a lot along the way. You picked a niche market that had a large demographic potential. How'd you learn how to sell? I mean, you started off in the business. I'm guessing you didn't have the best closing rate like most people don't when you start off. But today you got, from what I understand, a nice process where if people follow this simple process, can convert up to what, 80%?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So the appointment or the first step is you got to have people to talk to, right?
Right.
And so some of your viewers and listeners may already have large numbers of clients. So I would ask them to consider this question. And this is sort of how we looked at it. We said, all right, does every single client file we have one of two things in it? Either A, a fully developed long-term care plan that addresses this issue. How do you pay for care in the most tax efficient, cost effective way? Do you have a plan? Where are you going to get your care at? How are you going to pay for it? If you don't have a long-term care plan, which asset are you going to liquidate first? And either that should be in the client file or a disclosure that says, yeah, my advisor sat down with me. I decided to not move forward. So what we did was we developed a tool that we used. And so the key to it for us, I mean, I wish I could say I was a great salesperson. I just know how to memorize a script and follow a process. And if they say something like, if it's not broke, don't fix it, we ain't fixed it.
So I hope everybody is getting that. He says he's not a great salesperson, but of course that's after top of the table for 18 years in a row. But the formula is in here. And it looks like that little piece of disclosure you were talking about is also on the back of this thing. Right?
Yeah.
So it's built
exactly
right into the sales process.
So what's interesting, I'll add on that too, is that the guys in Tim's office were constantly impressed at Don's. I'm sorry, I said Tim's office. The guys at Don's office, Tim was who I was referring to.
Yeah.
Constantly impressed at how he closes 80% of the clients he sits down with, whereas all the other advisors, you work with hundreds of them, they don't close at that kind of a success rate. So Tim actually convinced Don to put this thing in writing and show your process. And that's the key to success in our business. You have to understand a process and get so good at it that it comes out and it flows naturally.
Sure.
Because everyone knows that, sales is just a transfer of your energy to your consumer, getting your consumer to buy onto the idea. And my favorite piece is like Jeff wanted, if you want to show it again, right on the back, if the client says no, you're protected by just saying, hey, totally understand. You're good to go on long-term care. You're a multimillionaire. You're going to pay your own way. We just need you to sign this form. Says that we talked about it because there is litigation. And that was my next question to you. That's popping up all over the country of not the clients, but those clients' children are suing insurance agents because they didn't tell their parents about long-term care.
Yeah.
And you had some experience with that.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So the first test would be if you go to your own personal website and look at your site. If it says we sell auto, homeowners, life, and you've got a bullet point in it that says long-term care, either do one of two things. Either A, take the long-term care bullet off if you're not sitting down with every client, because that's what the plaintiff's attorney is going to look at. He's going to say, well, it says here on your website that you do long-term care. How come you didn't sit down with the Smith family, even though you sat down with them 10 years in a row to go over their indexed annuity statement and reallocate? You never once brought up long-term care. I mean, it's a slam dunk case. So one of the things that we said is, well, you know, if you get lemons in life, you make lemonade. So here we had, you know, in 2001, we had a couple thousand client files already. Our first step, and this is what I would advise the listeners and the viewers of this show to do, is go back, sit down with each one of them, but don't go back unprepared. You know, and I know they're going to make an offer of this, but I would encourage you to call your ECA marketer and get this piece from them. It's real simple to do. And in here, it'll explain exactly how to go about this process. And you will literally be able to, in about 20 minutes, close the opening interview and get the second appointment. This is done as a 2-call interview, and you'll have over 80% success rate. It's not just me that's doing it, by the way. There's reps across the country that are now using it. The interesting part, and unless they're working with you guys, it's really hard to get access to that.
Sure.
So they need to call call one of your marketers.
The ECA marketing number. Yeah. We'll give that out later, but many of you already have it, but we'll probably post it down below the recording of this here at the end of the podcast today. So, so this kind of brings up some other questions. I mean, I know this is really the culmination of 36 years in the industry of what's worked, and that kind of pivotal switch to niche marketing by having that targeted specialization. What prompted that in the first place? Like, how did you say, gosh, I really need to not be all things to all people? Where did that come from?
Yeah, so our offices are based in St. Louis, Missouri. I know Joe's been there, and well, it's the worldwide headquarters of 4 of the top major broker dealers. You've got Edward Jones there. There's one of those on every corner. You've got Wells Fargo's got a major presence there, and there's no way that a little company like ours called Wealth Protection Advisors could compete with those big companies. So we said, well, let's go out into the blue ocean where nobody else is.
Got it.
You see, that was the key to it. And when we started talking about it, we started getting unsolicited referrals. Like you guys, I was trained, a bunch of different referral talks, all of which I was terrible at. One of what was the referral talk, we've all heard it. Well, I get paid 2 ways. Number 1, you do the business through me. And number 2, you give me the names of 8 of your friends that do not want to hear from me, right? And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't even do that. But now we're getting unsolicited referrals because at the sale event that people are saying, they look over their spouse, they go, we need to have Debbie come in here. Well, who's Debbie? That's my sister-in-law and her husband, because they don't have anything like this. I mean, it's the craziest thing I've ever seen. So this piece plus this book, and we figured out a way to take on these books, a way to customize the cover that's compliant, but can become a sales tool for advisors. So, if they're working with ECA, they can order these, by, working, of course, they got to be working with ECA, they can get this and that tool. But one of the things is we were teaching people how to do it. And the problem is I just ran out of time, having somebody call me and having me explain it. So we created a video training system, which again, if they're doing business with you, is made available free of charge to them, where it teaches them exactly how to use this, step-by-step instructions. But then there's a opening interview where we hired an actress to come in. I do an opening interview with her and a closing interview, and they see exactly each step. In addition, on the website where the training videos are at, we also have this all scripted. So if somebody learns better by reading instead of watching, it's
designed to work for anybody.
Yeah, exactly.
And their learning style. So this is really basically the fast track to top of the table. If they do what you did,
that's a good way of putting
all
it.
In a little. Yeah. We got to retitle this here: fast track to top of the table. So obviously this is sales stuff. It's marketing stuff. I think a lot of advisors out there have that same problem all over the country, even today. So they're out there with their independent practice. They're competing against Raymond James, Edward Jones, Merrill Lynch, and they're trying to be all things to all people.
That's right.
So you're saying that's probably not the best way to go. We need to get you into a market that lets you stand out, and this is a way to do that.
Amen.
And
Exactly.
get referrals on an automatic pilot basis versus having to do the canned referral.
Yeah.
pitch
So,
and the painful referral.
so one of the things I was mentioning to Joe and one of the other guys during lunch earlier was we've tested, for 17 years. We're doing things differently today than we were 10 years ago. So as an example, we have a seminar system that allows people to get a copy of this book. So if somebody's watching this, they're like, well, I can do a seminar. That's great. But there might be somebody on that's watching it said, boy, I could never stand up in front of a group. Or the people who are doing seminar, you might say something like, well, I can stand up in front of a group, but I'd like to have a way where I can drive some people to my office where I don't have to do the seminar. Mm-hmm. So with that, we've created a series of radio and television commercials. Now, this is a little bit more complex, but there will be some advisors where this will resonate. So the advisor would work through ECA with us to actually co-author a state or a region-specific copy of this book, or a book that we have called Tax-Free Money for Long-Term Care. It's then their picture, their bio, their information on the back, and they actually take ownership interest in that they're rewriting a few of the chapters. So let's say if, here we're in Minneapolis, Jeff says, Don, I want to do this. Well, it would be the Minneapolis edition of Tax-Free Money for Long-Term Care, or Don't Go Broke. From there, then what we do is we bring them into the studio, and we cut some radio and television commercials that then run in their marketplace, and the phone will ring off the hook.
And so part of the reason that they're engaging in the co-authoring of the book and writing some chapters is that gives them that instant expertise in this niche, right? That authority,
credibility,
they can't get any other way.
They're credentialed. They become the obvious expert literally overnight. It gives them rock star status.
Coupled with some publicity and paid advertising.
Exactly.
And using the book as a centerpiece of the marketing.
Yes.
So, okay, great. Well, and I know that's an exciting opportunity for people that are interested. You may want to even call your marketers right now while you're listening and ask about Don't Go Broke in a Nursing Home and working with the $1 Million Advisor program that Don Quante and his team developed. Let's see, where do we go from here? What other questions do we want to talk about? What do we want to explore?
Let's talk a little bit more about marketing, Don, because I know that you've been there, done that with, I think, everything that has ever been out there.
And inevitably had stuff that failed, right?
Yeah. So if you want to share a little bit of maybe your experiences you've had with other types of marketing, and I'm leading you to it because I know you've got some really good marketing that's working today. It's getting in front of lots of prospects. But I'm just kind of curious.
Things that didn't work
throughout your career, what other kind of stuff have you tried, and successes, failures, both? If you have anything you want to share.
Other people's programs, you name it, I tried it. I mean, I bought every motivational book. I mean, if Zig Ziglar did a tape, I got it.
Sure.
If Tony Robbins did a tape, I've got it. All the top of the table stuff, I bought it all. And while you can glean things, Joe, from each one of them, what I found is for me, it needed to be specialization, and it needed to be something I was passionate about. So if there's an advisor listening or watching this that has a personal experience where they had an aunt and uncle, somebody like you, where it was grandma or grandpa, I mean, hands down, this message and this sales system is going to resonate with them because they're passionate about that.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key to it. Now, fast forward to our own programs, boy, we've got a list, a stack of things this tall that didn't work.
Yeah, you were saying that earlier with the training with our team that, you got a small stack of the stuff that worked and a huge stack of what didn't. Tell us about some of the failures. I'm sure most everybody's had marketing failures.
Yeah.
It's watching.
So I'm in South Florida 5 years ago, deep sea fishing, and we stopped to get some coolers and beer and soda water, and a friend of mine says, Don, isn't that what you do? And he points up to a billboard that says, do you need help paying for mom's long-term care? If so, call. And it's got an 800 number. And I'm like, that's brilliant. So I write it down. Well, and when I call it, it's not a financial planning firm, but instead a law firm, plaintiff's attorney, suing people, advisors for failure to discuss the topic. And I thought, well, if his phone's ringing off the hook, the same sort of thing would work for me, but I'll just say, well, there's things that we can do. Yeah.
Right.
So I put the billboard up at the interstate of Highway 70 and 94, not far from our office. And, $10,000 later, 0 clients to show for it. So don't do billboards is the point, Jeff.
Billboards are out.
Billboards won't work.
Unless you're a law firm.
Unless you're a law firm, then do a billboard. You know
Right.
what I'm saying?
We've tested that one. It's off the list at this point. So obviously people have had issues with direct mail at various times. I know you were telling a story about even your own program, which was cooking like crazy and then hit a little glitch. Well, sometimes we know stuff extinguishes, the message loses its impact. This might have been due to completely other reasons. Maybe tell us a little bit about that. I thought that was kind of an interesting.
So the direct mail is kind of an interesting thing because we historically had filled the Don't Go Broke in a Nursing Home workshops. We'd have 15 to 30 people pretty much at will. And we would do that using newspaper ads or direct mail. In St. Louis, we would use direct mail a lot because, 4 or 5 months out of the year, we get unpredictable rain. And if you're doing newspaper ads and, it pours down rain and the newspaper's at the bottom of the driveway, guess what? People got to soak in newspaper, can't open it up and read it. So you just wasted your money. So direct mail would guarantee it would get into the mailbox and we could target a lot better. So we were doing that. And then something kind of unusual happened in our country. And that was that for the first time, somebody who had no experience in politics decided to run for president. Everybody knows now that we've since elected Donald Trump as president. Well, during that time, there was much distraction out there about anything other than politics, and the amount of mail that was in the mailbox was that thick. So what happened is we go through ebb and flows with regular direct mail. I can tell you though, if the direct mail is tied to a cause, and we call this cause marketing. So let's say you figure out a way to tie your message to the Girl Scouts of America. People that support the Girl Scouts of America would look fondly on your advertisement maybe. Well, for us, because of the topic, we signed the national agreement that advisors at ECA have access to with the Dementia Society of America. And there's a way where you can actually send out approved postcards and save somewhere between $800 to $1,000 per mailing, with the response rates being almost 3 times as good as what we were getting on our basic mail. And that has to do with the messaging. Okay.
So it's a combination of the affinity with a cause that people are passionate about, coupled with a solution that relates to that.
Absolutely. And the people who are coming in oftentimes have a loved one sitting right there with them at the event that just got an early diagnosis of Alzheimer's and or one of the other forms of dementia. And for the audience, and we were talking about this earlier, you're like, well, Don, I didn't know there were 70 different kinds of dementia, right? You've got things like vitamin B deficiency dementia, you've got Lewy body dementia, you've got Alzheimer's. Parkinson would be another example. So anybody who's dealing with those issues will come to this kind of event to learn about the 5 health-related situations that they need to address, and then the 2 others, which is one's legal and one's financial, which is where the advisor comes into play. It's educational, and then they schedule appointments like mad. Well, the interesting thing is the revenues that are generated off of that kind of message are through the roof, because the people are in a situation where they don't have a choice other than to take action and do something. And I know we don't have enough time today to go into all of the different strategies, but you guys at ECA know exactly how to go about that, because there's several things you can do with cash benefit, asset-based long-term care.
So even if the folks that are coming in response to the marketing already have some health issues related to morbidity, that doesn't mean they're out. There's still stuff we can do. So that's important to know.
I mean, the one product that you guys have on your product shelf, there's only one health question. It says, are you currently residing in a nursing home? If the answer is no, you write those orders all day long.
Right?
Yeah.
So very limited underwriting. And so, so this is good to know. I had another question that just skipped my mind. I was like, where was I going to go with that?
I have one if you want to think about it. I thought it was really interesting, and I won't share Don's numbers, but he showed me his financial statement from the last few years. What I thought was the most interesting about that is, even though he specializes so focused on long-term care, he actually makes more of his money off of assets under management gathering. And I know you mentioned a little bit, $3 to every $1 of asset-based long-term care you actually collect in the AUM business. And it's not even your specialty. It's not even your real focus. How do you collect so much AUM?
Yeah, so it's really simple. At the policy delivery, I'll say something like, do you have any other questions, Joe? We've gone through, the product, how it pays cash benefit. We've used this annuity as the funding mechanism. Any questions? No, you've been real thorough. Well, Joe, I've got one question for you. I was just curious if you know the reason why your advisor on your big 401k still has you tied up in mutual funds. And they will usually say, well, what do you mean? I said, well, it's a bit unusual to me that you have everything with one mutual fund company, American funds, and it's all in equity growth and income. When the approach that sometimes works best for clients would be to first off look at who would be the best custodian, and fees do matter, and get the lowest custodian prices out there possible. And then with the kind of money you have, and this is the key phrase, with the kind of money you have, we'd have the ability to hire private third-party money managers. As an example, I'll just give you one. Morningstar might be a place where we would have managed the money. And so what we can oftentimes do is reduce the level of risk you're taking and increase returns, and do that all while saving a considerable amount in the area of fees. If we were able to do that, is that something we ought to take a look at?
Absolutely.
And it's pretty straightforward, because we've had clients say before, well, Don, I'm not real happy. And I'm like, whoa, what did you do something? He says, no, I just don't understand why my XYZ rep never brought this up. I go in there quarterly. So the fact that we were first to the table in something that the other advisors don't want to worry about. And I always try to be plain. I said, no, we shouldn't be too mean on them. They, after all, we're too busy trying to be all things to all people. We specialize, but, this other area, and by the way, our brochure, and any of the advisors who are listening, if they want to get this from you guys, just let me know and I'll get it to them. I can show them how our corporate brochure is set up. We only do two things at Wealth Protection Advisors: elder care financial plans, which addresses this issue of how do you pay for long-term care in the most tax efficient, cost-effective way. And the second thing is income for life, which is what everybody else talks about. That's a plan that makes sure you don't run out of money during your lifetime, period. And so you've got plenty of income. And so while we market that way, and that's the perception, we are smart enough to understand how to do life insurance, second to die, pension maximization. It's just not what our focus is. So, so if you look differently, if you're in the blue ocean where nobody else is at, and you look totally different, the leads are pretty easy to get, quite frankly.
Yeah, you got to go fishing in the right waters with the right bait. And
Yes.
I think the problem is that people are showing up, in the really competitive spaces without anything unique. And
Yes.
That's a tough that's a tough business to be in, because you're just never going to really get out of that.
Right.
Income limited just by bad marketing, really, is what it comes down to.
Yeah, I was with an advisor the other day who challenged me. He said, Don, I met you at the Forum 400 meeting, and you said from the stage that you could take anybody and show them how to add $1 million of revenue to their bottom line without changing what they're doing, just by adding this. And I said, yeah, it's real simple. You need to see 3 people using this tool, and on the average, with an 80% closing ratio, you'll end up with 2 of them. So, I mean, the math is a little bit different. It's 2.4, but let's just say 2. Average commission on these cases, if you just use one carrier, is going to be about $10,000. The average, if you do it the way I showed you guys earlier, using 2 carriers involved, it's about $25,000. So if all you do is 1 case per week, a lot of people aren't willing to work that hard, but 1 case a week is about $1 million of revenue.
So if this isn't a hobby and this is actually a business for you,
absolutely,
you can meet with somebody once a week and close some business and have a decent number and add that extra $1 million of revenue.
But frankly, Jeff, even if it is a hobby for these guys, and a lot of reps that we work with, it is a hobby, right? They only
Sure.
work, they see clients once a week or whatever. They've got some of their favorites. I still think that there's an
You can
opportunity
still
where they
squeeze
can go
that
back
in.
and make some additional revenue other than what they've been doing by providing a really valuable service. Like I said, one of two things, and you covered the one earlier, showing people what their guaranteed lifetime income number is. Doesn't mean everyone should take it, but they all should know what it is. And two, show them a way to protect their assets against long-term care spend on risk. And you're doing both, which, I mean, I will add most of the very successful financial advisors I work with, and over my 20-year career of only working with advisors as a wholesale capacity, I can tell the difference between a successful advisor and not. And I'll tell you that there's one word that covers it every time: passion. You have to have passion for what you're doing. Or I've told my marketers this in marketing meetings 100 times, find something else to do. It's really that easy. If the money is there, but you don't have the passion for what you're doing, go find something else to do, because the money's going to run out when something changes, and you're not going to have the passion to change what's necessary to make it continue to be successful. If you have the passion, that's what's the first step. Passion is what's going to create hard work, and that's what I see in your office, and I applaud you for that every single day.
Thank you.
So,
Yeah, thank you.
So people are always skeptical of every new marketing program that's out there.
No.
And there's a lot of us, probably me included, and I know you've admitted to it, that there's a little bit of ADD going on, and everybody's after that next shiny object. What's the hard part about this program? I mean, what's the challenge for an agent actually doing this? What's the thing that's going to really be the obstacle to actually making this work?
They have to follow it. Simply, they have to follow it. And I mentioned to you earlier that I'm one of those people who has ADD.
Right,
so when I built this presentation, I made sure that the transition phrases were at the top of each page on this, and it might be kind of hard to see. But they're really, and if it's okay, I'll talk about the three questions. Is that all right?
Yeah, let's do it.
So one of the things that we start out with is we would say something like, so Jeff, you know, I'm not a jinx, but we need to talk about the elephant in the room, this issue of long-term care. Most people would rather avoid the topic than discuss it, but the risk is real. Every 68 seconds, somebody's diagnosed with Alzheimer's. Unfortunately, we don't have the ability, like this guy does, to see into the crystal ball in the future that we're going to get sick. But if you could see that, you'd have to ask yourself three questions. And this is where the ADD is not a problem, because I put the questions right in here.
Right.
All the advisor has to do after watching the video training and reading the script is just follow it then. So question number one, Jeff, if you get sick and need long-term care, where would you want to receive your care? Most people say
Home.
at home. So you then write in with a Sharpie, well, 4 years of care at 50,000 a year is 200,000. And then you say to the client, question number two is based on your total long-term care expenses being 200,000, which asset would you liquidate first? And you've got the ability to then fill in those assets. Let's say they said the IRA. You would then fill in on the next page, and you would say, if there was a better way to use just a little bit of your IRA to protect all of it, is that something we ought to take a look at? Everybody will say yes. You then write it in, and then you say something like, you know, it looks too good to be true. What's the catch? Well, Mr. Prospect, in this case, Jeff, acting as the client, that the catch is that it's not your money that qualifies you for this, it's your health. We need to ask some health questions. So if you then do this right, you'll then be able to explain to the client how, after going back to the office, you schedule an appointment, which, believe it or not, is something that most advisors fail to do during the first meeting.
Which is shocking, but
it is
true.
the kiss of death. You got to
Right.
schedule that second appointment.
Right.
So at that point, you're going to explain to them how there's over 2,000 insurance companies. We took out of 200 that got, top ratings. From that group, there's only 100 that have been around 100 years. Most advisors don't know that. 30 or so that have a robust long-term care offering on an annuity or life insurance chassis. I say to the client, look, would you be all right if I had my team get me the 3 finalists, and then I'll select the one that I believe is best for you? Every time, if you ask the question the right way, they say yes. And then so when you
that's sort of the preemptive strike, so I don't have to show up with 20 illustrations.
Exactly.
I can show them one thing where they can focus on one thing and make a decision yes or no on that one thing, not on 10 things that I don't even know how to evaluate.
But the beautiful part about it is the ECA marketer should run all of the different companies so that you can feel confident that what you're showing is the best.
Right.
But don't show them all the other stuff.
Right.
Why? Well, if you don't use that phraseology properly, then you'll get into a piston match where you're having to show all the different ones. You want to get it limited down to the one. So then what we say during that first meeting is, look, during the next meeting, just so we're clear, no money's going to change hands, so leave your checkbook at home. Our goal is to see if what we come up with makes sense to you. And if so, we'll figure out how to get the health information to the carrier. This is how you get an 80% closing ratio. You got to keep it simple. Here's the thing of what happens. I get advisors that want to change things. They're like, well, Don, I'd really rather say it this way. I'd say, don't change the lines. If you got an 80% closing ratio, then you don't need me. If you don't have an 80% closing ratio on this, don't change the lines.
That's and I know you mentioned Tony Robbins earlier, and he's a big advocate of this concept of modeling success. So do what works. This is what works. Just do it. Don't frickin' reinvent the wheel. That's a waste of time. The wheel already exists and it already works great. So just do it. So I like to always circle back to, because there are a lot of agents that have been successful at times and then markets change and then, they had their businesses going through an ebb and flow. You've probably been through that too, it sounds like. Mm-hmm. I like to talk about a little bit of the failures because everybody always thinks, well, I could never be Don Quante. I can never do what he did. He's, top of the table for 18 years. But there was a time where life was different.
Oh my gosh.
So let's tell people what a day was like when you didn't figure out when you hadn't figured out the marketing. What was
so what I was doing back before 2001 is my day would start usually around 10 o'clock. I'd roll into the office. I'm not a coffee drinker, but I would get a cold caffeine, as I called it, Coke or Diet Coke, and I drink that. And about 11, I start thinking about where I was going to go to lunch, and I'd corral a couple of the other agents, and we'd have a 2-hour lunch. And then at 3 o'clock, I'd run some illustrations for a 6 o'clock call, only to find out at 10 to 6 that the people that I was going to talk to about $50 a month check-o-matic on life insurance canceled because their kid had a softball game that they'd forgot about. And then my next call I was hoping wouldn't show up. Was hoping wouldn't cancel. And I'd show up and I remember it was like it was yesterday. My son, who's now in the business with us, he's 25, but he was a little guy. And he said, Daddy, what do you do for a living? And I said, well, Daddy's a magician. And he said, a magician? I said, yeah. I said, I can do doorbell magic. And he said, what was that? And I told him, well, it's when you pull up in front of the house. You're supposed to have an appointment at 8 p.m. It's dark outside, but the lights are inside the house. And when you press the doorbell, it immediately makes all the lights in the house go out. That's doorbell magic. And I said, or it's called getting porched or stood up or whatever you want. But at the end of the day, it's a pretty demeaning thing,
right?
Considering you were away from your family. So I went to
for a $50 commission.
Yeah, for $50 or $100 commission. So I went to an MDRT, not top of the table, but MDRT meeting, where a guy stood up and he was supposedly a guru on things. And he said his first bit of advice, his first tip was, he said that dawn is prettier than dusk. And I went, what in the world does this mean? And then he went on to say that 70% of all goods and services sold in the United States are sold before 12 noon. So I said, well, wait a second. Why is it then that the insurance company that I represent tells me that I need to be seeing people at night across the kitchen table? There's a disconnect here.
Right.
And so at that time, my grandmother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. We were going through a bunch of money. I started researching, long-term care and found nobody was doing that in St. Louis, particularly not using asset-based strategies. Right. Because the big knock against long-term care is if you don't use it, you lose it. And everything that we do, the ECA model is, look, these products guarantee premium, they guarantee benefit, they guarantee death benefit. And oh, by the way, if you don't use it, you don't lose it. And some of the products, as you know, have a money back guarantee on them.
Yep.
So what changed for me was that one little thing. And we talked about this earlier, but in a horse race, it's not, the person who's making $120,000 right now, if they're in second place and the next guy's making 1.2 million, you'd say, well, they're 10 times better. No, it's oftentimes just a noser. It's that one little slight incremental change. I'll give you another example. When people come into the office in the past, I used to never ask for birth dates, names, address, phone numbers, and birth dates of their kids. So right now, if somebody comes in and let's say they're 75 or 80 years old, there's a pretty good chance that their kid is going to be mid 50s to late 50s. So we started about 10 years ago doing what we call X dating. And Jeff, that's where we would ask for the date of birth of their children. And then we use a CRM called Redtail. You could use any one of them, but we created a category where we legislatively X date, which means bring up that record at several key times: 59 and a half, 62, 64 and a half, and 70 and a half. And at 59 and a half, it's so obvious, right? It's the point that somebody with a large 401k would have an opportunity to do an in-service withdrawal into an equity index to do with income rider. I can't tell you how many of those sales we made. And like Joe said earlier, whether that goes into an indexed annuity or AUM, those all come because of the marketing we do centered around this topic known as long-term care.
Well, this has been a really fun interview to hear all your expertise and your, your path from, beginner to super success. And I think the one thing that you just mentioned that's really kind of a take home from this podcast is that you don't necessarily have that much that you're doing differently from somebody else that makes you the top of the table versus the guy that's making 10 times less than you. And part of that is that you got to follow the formula. Don't reinvent the wheel again. Don't try to. These are distinctions you've made that actually work, that got you to that little extra, result that makes you 10 times better.
Yeah, I'd suggest one thing, that the people that are listening call the ECA, their ECA marketer, Joe or whoever, you, Jeff, and request that they get permission to use this piece. And you guys know how to grant them the permission. Get them this piece and the training videos. And then have them consider customizing the back cover of this book. It has all of the strategies in there on how to use asset-based long-term care. This is a client-facing piece that they give their customers. And with these two things, I can't imagine somebody wouldn't be able to dramatically drive their revenue up.
And get that little distinction that you've made that was a sea change in your business.
Exactly.
And it can be for you all too. So we're going to wrap up our podcast today. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in to Quantum Marketing Radio. And if you want to take advantage of any of this stuff, call 800-356-4189 and talk to your life marketer. They'll be able to get you all the different options that are available to work with Don and his program and implement it in your business. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you. Tune in again next month.
Thank you.
Thanks.